Welcome back to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into some really fantastic field notes from a gardener named Ang, dated July 31st, 2026. And honestly, this entry is just a wonderful mix of meticulous scientific observation, that totally relatable frustration we've all felt, and then this gorgeous pivot right into artistic nostalgia. We're going to see exactly how a completely ordinary weed can trigger a massive shift in perspective. So, how do you actually identify a plant that absolutely refuses to show its true colors? Let's just skip the usual setup and jump right into this botanical cold case. We're looking at a mystery plant that's basically taken up residency right in Ang's front yard, and it is stubbornly resisting all attempts at classification. It's just sitting there, right in plain sight, totally anonymous. It's one of those fantastic little puzzles that, anyone who's ever tended a garden or even kept a houseplant alive can totally relate to. Okay, let's dive into this. The central problem Ang is dealing with here is that the plant looks, well, surprisingly ordinary. According to the notes, it's a pretty common weed for the area, but the main roadblock is just how incredibly unremarkable the foliage is. Ang literally describes it as having a rather common leaf shape. And you know the struggle, right? When a sprout looks like literally every other generic green thing in the dirt, figuring out its exact species is nearly impossible. There are no wild serrated edges, no crazy colors, absolutely zero distinct clues. It's just remarkably, frustratingly normal. Ang actually sums up the dilemma perfectly in the notes, writing, "Without unique traits or even flowers, it has been rather challenging for proper and correct identification." Man, that just perfectly captures the universal frustration of gardening, doesn't it? Nature is just sitting there, giving Ang absolutely nothing to work with. No blooms, no patterns, just green leaves doing what green leaves do. It is a classic standoff between the observer trying to catalog their environment and the environment just flat out refusing to be categorized. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Aang pivots from that frustration straight into strategic action. Instead of throwing in the towel, they come up with a really methodical, scientific plan. First up, patience. They're just going to wait for it to bloom in the coming weeks, because as we know, flowers are usually the dead giveaway for a species. But they're also getting proactive. They plan to take macro, super close-up shots of the back of the leaves and really inspect the structural details of the plant's stem. The hope is that these tiny, micro details will finally crack the case. It is just a brilliant example of citizen science in action. But right here is where the notes take a genuinely beautiful turn. I want to slow down for a second, because the simple act of staring at this frustrating generic weed actually triggers a really vivid nostalgic memory from Aang's youth. The whole scientific frustration of not knowing the plant's name just kind of melts away, and it gives way to a completely different perspective on nature. Suddenly, it's not a specimen that needs a label, it's a canvas for art. And this brilliantly illustrates a really specific artistic process from Eng's childhood, making skeleton leaves. It's so methodical. It starts with collecting large leaves, letting them dry out completely, and then carefully, painstakingly removing the fleshy green part. Once all that is stripped away, you expose the underlying veins, maybe pake those delicate remains, and finally wrap them up in plastic to preserve them. It's funny. It's a craft that almost perfectly mirrors the scientific process we were just talking about, but the end goal is entirely about creating beauty, not just extracting data. I really want us to just take a beat and appreciate the beautiful sensory imagery in Aang's reflection here. By removing that outer flesh, they, quote, expose the delicate, translucent network of veins. I mean, just think about the contrast there. Earlier, the leaf was just this annoying obstacle, right? A common shape that wouldn't give up its identity. But now, through this lens of memory and art, that exact same botanical structure is celebrated as this delicate, translucent network. It's this deep, deep appreciation for the hidden architecture of nature that we honestly probably walk right past every single day. And this trip down memory lane isn't just some fleeting daydream either. It actually sparks a really tangible plan for the present. Aang mentions that they occasionally hit up local plant nurseries to collect Indian almond leaves, which they specifically use for fish breeding. But now, totally inspired by this random mystery weed and those old memories, Aang thinks exploring this skeleton leaf art form again would be a great addition to those upcoming nursery field trips. It's just this really lovely full-circle moment, bringing a childhood craft right back into their current hobbies. Which brings us to the core takeaway of this whole explainer. Aang started out just looking for a label, a simple name for a generic weed, and ended up rediscovering the intricate, hidden artistry of the natural world. So I want to leave you with this to ponder today. What hidden artistry is waiting to be uncovered in your own front yard? The next time you spot a frustratingly common weed, maybe take a second look. Look past the name and really look at the structure. You might be surprised by what you find.